Good afternoon. It's great to see you all. I'll apologize ahead. I've got just a little bit of a cold in my voice, and you might pick that up, and we'll see if it holds at this volume for the next 20 minutes or so. Hopefully it will. I do get the great privilege to serve as the chair of the MinneMinds Coalition, and have for the last 3 years. This will be our fourth legislative session together. So it's interesting for me to think that we've been at this for that length of time. But it's beginning to build a little history with our group, and we've had some ups and downs, but mostly I'm here to share what I think is a good news story with you about the progress that our state has been making and the contributions that we think we're providing to help move things forward. I'd like to start with this slide because the history of MinneMinds is tied to a group of funders, philanthropic organizations in Minnesota called Start Early. And Start Early came together 5 years ago or so with the idea that we, as a group of funders, philanthropic organizations, wanted to make sure that all children in the state of Minnesota were fully ready for kindergarten. And we had already come to the conclusion that operating independently and with only our grant-making dollars, that we weren't able to make that level of change. And so by working together and using our influence to educate, to act as a catalyst for change, to create a coalition that would be legislatively active, these were the kinds of things we were dreaming about and began to work on. So MinneMinds is a legislative campaign that is part of the Start Early funders. And if I don't say those things together, people get a little confused about what's what. The problem that we started with 5 years ago is we had years and years of data in the state of Minnesota that never changed. It didn't change in most of my professional career. And it was that about half the children in the state of Minnesota were entering kindergarten not fully prepared. And in a recent research paper that Wilder did, they concluded that for every kindergarten class where half the children enter in the state of Minnesota not fully prepared, it would ultimately cost our state almost $1 billion, and this estimate $860 million, in increased costs, like special education costs, or lost revenue where perhaps children go through their education process and work in lower paid positions and don't produce as much revenue. So this was these are some of the facts that drove us to want to change the status quo. And we also are cognizant of the fact that many of the kids who are not fully prepared are coming from low-income households. And we all know the data that even through the economic recession and now partial recovery, the number of children on free and reduced lunch in our state actually continues to grow. And so this is a pretty serious issue that is interconnected on this kindergarten readiness problem. And I also think it's helpful just to pause and to say, what is it that we're about? We are very focused as a group to make sure that all children in our state are fully ready for kindergarten by 2020. So this is something we've been marching toward for 5 years now, and we continue to march toward it. And you'll see in our next slide in a minute that we always have thought this might be a 10-year effort. And many of us have been working at it for quite a while now. I mentioned the Start Early funders. When we created that coalition 5 years ago, there were 6 members. That coalition now has grown to 27 or 28, and it is a statewide coalition. And again, just to remember, all of these funders invest together about $20 million a year in early childhood, which sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but the scope of the problem is 10 or 20 times that large, and that's why we have to work at this issue as a public policy issue, because it's just too big for philanthropy. So I was mentioning that when we came together, we began to think about our public policy strategies in a 10-year increment. And it was helpful for all of us to plot our strategies on a piece of paper like this, because it made us understand that we had to be in it for the long haul. It was good for us to bring back to our boards, and it was good for us to share with legislators. And the reason it was good for legislators is that most days legislators would listen to your story if you could get enough attention, and then they would get overwhelmed by the scope and the scale. And this allowed us to kind of share with them in a picture, no, we're in this for the long haul, we understand this is going to take a little bit of time. And then now, 5 years later, it also is a useful storytelling document, because you can say, hey, we've kind of stayed the course and we've got some progress to share. So in brief terms, sorry, my PowerPoint jumped 2 slides. The first thing that we were committed to was creating an Office of Early Learning, independent Office of Early Learning at the state of Minnesota, so we would have ongoing, enduring leadership, and that its primary focus would be to align resources for children 0 to 5 across 3 different departments: education, human services, and health. And in our state, one of our challenges is we have some good resources available for children and families. Not enough, but we have some. And they're across 3 departments and not very well coordinated. Long story short, just for today, Melvin Carter used to serve as the director of the Office of Early Learning in the Department of Education. A couple months ago, the governor moved him out of the Department of Education, reassigned him to the governor's office, and gave him a new job. And he is now the executive director of the Children's Cabinet. And while a little imperfect for us, not quite an independent office, it does allow us as a community and a state to have somebody in place who is focused on aligning the current resources across those 3 departments. So that was really our first big success. It was a legislative effort to get a national study done, et cetera. The second thing we as a group of funders worked on was a Race to the Top grant that became available publicly, at least through an RFP 5 years ago. Our state was in a government shutdown, and so the funders stepped in and began to collect information, put that proposal together with the help of some outside grant writers and with the Department of Education. Long story short, our state won 1 of 8 or 9 grants. It was $45 million, and it has really served as the catalyst to drive the expansion of the parent-aware quality rating system statewide. Eric will talk about that. It has also been useful because it provided resources for 4 communities across the state to pilot test scholarships in North Minneapolis, Frogtown, White Earth Indian Reservation, and the Grand Rapids community up north. So very useful funding from the state. That funding is about ready to phase out. Another important point is that funding leveraged about $11 million of additional private philanthropy money, all geared toward helping the parent-aware quality rating system expand statewide. The phase 1 objective for the MinneMinds coalition then, we created that once we got the quality rating system moving forward, was to pursue funding for state scholarships for young children 3 and 4 years old. In our first 2 legislative sessions, which would have been 2013 and 14, we secured some of the very first new funding for early childhood in our state in many decades, and it was $55 million over those 2 sessions for scholarships. And then last year, just thinking about scholarships, we added another $48 million, and so we have a total pool of around $103 or $104 million of very stable funding for early learning scholarships. This is very good progress. However, it's always good to remember that just our original base case of 20,000 scholarships for low-income 3- and 4-year-olds, we're still about $200 million short. And so we really do need to go back and continue our advocacy work for that and other important needs that we'll show you in a minute. The MinneMinds Coalition has grown to be more than 100 members. I gave you a handout, and so on the back of your handout, it lists the current members. We are always eager and willing to engage new members, so if you have a church or a nonprofit or some other organization where you think you'd like to lend your voice, please let us know, because I think the bigger and more diverse that our coalition is, the more influence it has in the legislative work. That's the visual that you have in your hand is one that we created a few years ago, and it's intended to oversimplify a very complex world, and it's intended to be able to allow us to share our story with people, oftentimes legislators, in about 20 seconds or 30 seconds, because some days that's all you get. So the base case for MinneMinds, kind of phase 1, is we think there has been about 20,000 low-income 3- and 4-year-olds in the state of Minnesota who are sitting on a wait list somewhere in the state whose parents want them to go to a high-quality early learning program. They want them to go to a child care or a child care center or a preschool or a Head Start or a school-based, but the resources aren't available for those children. So 20,000, we think scholarships to those children that their parents could direct would be the best approach. And if you follow that forward, we have been big advocates for a diverse delivery system. We just want it to be high quality. So if a parent has a scholarship, we think that scholarship should stick with the child. So if the family moves across town, the child should keep his or her scholarship. We think the scholarship could be very useful at a Head Start or a school-based or a home-based program. Any of these would be great, and this is a very useful approach when you think about a statewide initiative, because the availability of delivery units are different across the state and in different communities. So more home-based care in greater Minnesota, more center-based care here in the urban environment, as one example. The return on investment, which Art Rolnick has made famous, we think the research is quite compelling. And that seems to be winning the day at the legislature as well. So fewer questions, almost no questions about whether or not early childhood is a good idea. The questions today are a bit more about how we're going to get it done. Last year, we ended up as a state investing $100 million of new funding in targeted early learning programs. I share this slide with you because my board, as an example, got a little bored, use that word twice, with the public discussion around early childhood as it was framed in the paper. And when the legislative session ended, their conclusion was nothing got done because they just got tired of the rancor. The contrary is this, is that on the left-hand side, we had $100 million of brand new funding, which is built into the financial future budgets and actually grows a little bit, for targeted early childhood education. Some money for scholarships, some for school-delivered school readiness, some for Head Start, and some for sliding fee childcare, which is acronymed CCAP. We had some other investments on the right-hand side, which I won't go into today, but they're useful, very helpful investments for early childhood and young children. The bottom line, that we wanted to communicate and have been, it is without question the largest single new investment in early childhood education in our state's history, we believe. So I just wanted to show you in a graph how scholarships have been expanding. It's a chart like this that gives us, as a coalition, energy. Because on an issue that didn't move for 2 or 3 decades, we're beginning to see movement. And it's, again, not enough to solve the problem, but we're making good progress. If you take a step back and you look at early learning investments the last 3 or 4 years that include sliding fee childcare, Head Start, school readiness, things of this nature, you get an even bigger chart. And we think this is important because MinneMinds, I think, is playing a big role in elevating the awareness of early childhood education as a big issue. And today, it's heading into 2016, it's likely going to be a top 3 or 4 issue. One of the things that we have learned or are learning as a coalition is that there's 2 discussions going on at the same time all the time. There's probably 10 or more. But for the less informed, I'm still a rookie at public policy. Policy is really important, and we're going to get into our future policy recommendation in a minute. But politics is important, and the 2 have to work together. And we have a lot of coalition members who want to focus just on policy, which is good, and we appreciate that. But we also have to be smart about politics. So I created this little vignette, this little chart here to say, how did we go from being a bipartisan kind of kumbaya effort 2-3 years ago to being in such kind of public conflict with the governor last year, which we didn't expect. And so here's some of the points that I just tried to compare and contrast. Of course, in 2013 and 14, the House and the Senate were DFL along with the governor. The governor won funding for all-day kindergarten, so he was really pursuing that, and given the situation, he got it done, which was a great victory. The governor also supported and signed the very first scholarship bill at $45 million. And early learning was still being questioned a little bit in the legislative process about its effectiveness. If you fast forward then to last session, well, what changed? Well, we had an election, and the House flipped, and it's now being led by the Republicans. The governor, because he won all-day kindergarten funding, then went out for his next big initiative, and he launched universal preschool for all 4-year-olds. That it was not possible in the previous session because all-day kindergarten wasn't funded. But that's how politics changes. And early learning scholarships, in the last session was still a bipartisan idea, but publicly it was cast as now a Republican House idea. But this is how the politics kind of framed the narrative in the big dialogue. The big shift, though, that I already mentioned, is that we have moved in the legislative discourse from questioning whether or not early learning is a good idea to now arguing, if you will, about how we're going to get it done. And that's a shift worth just understanding and valuing as a positive shift in the political process, not something to be upset about. Looking ahead to next year, CYIB is an acronym for the Children and Youth Issues Briefing. It's something we've been big advocates in supporting. In each of the last couple of years, we've had about 1,000 people attend, and it's an opportunity for us to bring people together and to learn about what are the legislative issues that are going to be up for debate that are going to affect children and youth in our community. The legislative session starts on March 8th. It's only 10 weeks. It ends on May 23rd. And I was with the group this morning, and they reminded me, no bathrooms at the Capitol. So even this might be too darn long. We'll see how that all works out. And also, just to remind us again, that there is an election coming, and that election is going to impact the politics of the session. Sometimes we're not sure how, but we will find out as that goes. All parties and leaders who are running for re-election are going to be trying to move things forward in a way that they think they can campaign on. and they don't also want a big, fight. So I think a lot of things are going to get ironed out ahead of time, or at least I'm hopeful. This is my crystal ball. It might be pretty consistent with others, kind of how are the legislative priorities next session going to lay out. This is a little crude and oversimplified, but I do think there will be a tax bill, and I think the Republican House is really going to lead with that. Transportation is going to be in play, and everybody will have a voice in that. But I've listed here, I think the Senate will probably push a little harder on that. And then the governor's been pretty clear in the last 2 months that early childhood will be likely his top issue. And I think that's useful to know, and he's been clear that he's willing to, insist or trade or consider, however he's feeling on a day, how this will yin and yang with the tax bill. Other things in play include bonding and also workforce disparities, kind of coming out of the challenges we've had in North Minneapolis. The governor's been pretty public about his interest in creating a new office at Deed and making some funding available. There's a surplus, and we all know that, but that makes many things in play even more. Third of that will go to reserves, but that still leaves money in play. And I don't know if this will matter, but of all the things I just mentioned, I don't think any of them are required. So we'll see what happens, what the legislators and the governor really wants to do, but there's not that legislative mandate to get these things done. So one of the things that we get asked a lot is, how is MinneMinds working with the governor and the governor's team to create greater resolution ahead of time? So one of the things we're working on is we're trying to find ways to work with the governor's team to reshift the conversation so that it's not a focus on universal preschool for all 4-year-olds run through a school system, or scholarships, and that is a false choice. And so we're hoping, as a group of MinneMinds leaders with the governor, to create a more robust discussion about what is the best approach to supporting Minnesota's most needy children and their families and their parents. So, to make that statement more real, I think what you'll see MinneMinds begin to do is to introduce ideas and perspective from parents more notably into the discussion. And I don't know exactly what all those voices might bring, but here are things that I hear when I'm with parents who have children, and kind of what it is parents need to be successful and what their children need. And this will not be the final list, but these are the kinds of things. Many parents we work with come from very diverse cultural communities, and they need and want providers who reflect their culture, and they need and want providers who are culturally competent and understand an array of cultures. This is something I think we're going to have to work very hard on and make sure the broad system can provide that level of service to our parents and our families. Many, many parents work or go to school, and they need access to full day and year-round opportunities. So half-day opportunities, while maybe useful and helpful for children, are oftentimes not as useful for parents who have to work. And if we were successful here, this would allow us to create a 2-generation approach to addressing poverty. Children get a great preparation and education. Parents also get an education and or the stability in their life to be able to be the parents they need and want to be by working full-time, if that's what they want. But this is what I hear when I visit with many parents. High-quality early learning program to ensure their children are fully ready for kindergarten. They want high-quality standards. There's not a parent I meet who wants a low-quality program. And increasingly, what we're hearing from parents is, and professionals, starting earlier is better. And I want to acknowledge, as MinneMinds got into the policy work, we started with 3- and 4-year-olds. We thought that would be easier to communicate and easier to move forward. We have always been strong advocates for prenatal to 5 and a holistic set of services for those kids and their parents. So legislative priorities that are emerging for MinneMinds right now, parent-aware quality rating as Race to the Top funds phase out. We need to fully fund the expansion and continued development of the parent-aware quality rating system. Scholarships, family access, we need to continue to pursue access funding in the form of scholarships and expand the cap, which is currently at $7,800, and to move it perhaps something closer to $12,000 or $14,000, so that children or families could in fact access full-day year-round care. And we also want to expand more to serve children 0 to 2, 0 to 3, because that whole continuum is, I think, really what parents are looking for in many situations. Starting earlier with some home visiting programs, we think this year advocating for some pilots that would build out consistent set of standards and outcome measurements would be a good place to invest this year. And then a thing we're still working on gets to the workforce delivery system for early childhood education. It's underfunded, underdeveloped. We have to strengthen, I think, the salaries all across the board to make that a more viable career choice and a stable one for providers. It has to be culturally diverse, so we have to be really smart about how that happens. And so everywhere we go, we hear stories about the workforce system and the ways that it's not able to meet the needs of children right now. So you'll see us come forward, I think, with some stronger recommendations. But I want you to know we can't deny that it's being talked about and that it's a huge barrier to future success. So you were very patient in allowing me to work through this with a couple of cups of water and a few breaks. I want to thank you for your attention. Erica is going to share an update on Parent Aware and the quality rating system, and then between us, I think we'd be happy to take your questions. Does that sound good? Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I am Erica Muss. I am the executive director of an organization called Parent Aware for School Readiness. We use the acronym PASSER to describe ourselves. We're a privately funded nonprofit with the mission of supporting the statewide expansion of the Parent Aware rating system. So we work a lot on Parent Aware. We also we're a member of the MinneMinds Coalition. We work a lot on scholarship expansion. So I'm going to talk today a little bit more in depth about these programs that the MinneMinds Coalition has been advocating for and that have been expanding in the state over the last 5 or so years. So first about Parent Aware. Parent Aware is a system that does 3 things. It helps parents find quality programs. So about 3/4 of Minnesota's children who aren't yet in school are outside of the care of their parents during the day. Those children are in a variety of different settings, and we know from years and years of research and talking with parents, and frankly the outcomes that children are getting, that parents need more information to help them find quality programs for their parents. So that's one of the important jobs that Parent Aware does. We also know that it's not possible to just say to our existing group of talented, eager, committed, wonderful child care professionals, improve your quality. Hey guys, improve your quality. They need support, trainings, grants to help them buy materials for the classroom. These are very often low margin small businesses operated by women. A lot of times you'll see later immigrant women or women of color, And we really want to support them in doing their very best for young children, and honor the fact that parents have chosen these providers. And we believe that the evidence so far from Parent Aware shows that they can rise to the challenge. And so we want to continue supporting them. And then the third thing is to help connect low-income children to high-quality programs, right? So for many families in Minnesota, it's okay to say, here's some information. You can use this when you make your choice, when you're out shopping for a place for your young child to be. And we also know that for an increasing number of families in the state, that's not enough. Those families need resources as well as information, and that's what the early learning scholarships do. So that's kind of how everything comes together. Just really quickly, here's what we know about the universe of young children ages 0 to 5 in Minnesota. There are about 427,000 of those children. That group of children, within that group of children, there are different subsets of children who are facing challenges to being ready for school. And you can see on the bottom that about a third of those children are from low-income families. When you think about where those children are during the day, the top row is the number of programs of a certain type. So we have nearly 10,000 family child care homes, about 1,600 child care centers, 700 school-based pre-kindergarten programs, that's public school-based, and about 300 Head Start programs. And in terms of the number of children served, the majority, a large group of children are served in family child care homes, over 100,000, about 90,000 in centers. So together, the child care sector serves the vast majority of these young children, and smaller numbers, about 30,000 in public schools and about 14,000 in Head Start programs. So when we approach our work, we like to think about, obviously, who the kids are, what kinds of programs exist, where are services being provided now, and all of these different types of programs are eligible to receive both scholarships, to serve children with scholarships, and also to participate in the Parent Aware rating program. So Parent Aware participation, we track the number of programs that are rated, and over time you'll see that number has grown steadily. So we started out in 2012, at the end of 2012, with about 500 rated programs. And we're looking, this is a number from August, at about 2,700 who are rated right now. So we've made great strides in terms of rating programs, and the ratings are available all around the state now. So in every county in the state, you'll find rated homes, centers, Head Start programs, school-based programs, all of the different types. This chart shows you red is not rated and blue is rated. So you can see this is family child care homes. We have a long way to go. But there, again, are 9,600 of these programs all around the state. So we're making headway, but in some of these categories, namely family child care providers and child care centers, we've got a lot of distance to cover. We're really encouraged by how far we've come. More work needs to be done. And then you see some of these other types of programs, Head Start programs, public school-based pre-kindergarten programs. We've made great strides and have rated large numbers of those types of programs. So we track this on a regular basis as well to know how we're doing and where we need to focus our efforts. But the most important thing, and what I'm here to talk about today, is how we're doing in terms of getting reaching the providers who are serving large numbers of low-income children, and also getting access for children with high needs, very often low-income children, to highly rated programs. So Parent Aware is a 1 to 4 star system, with 4 being the highest rating. So we want to move as many kids who need it into those higher rated programs as possible. And when you look at, Frank mentioned that Minnesota has a Race to the Top grant. And so over this time period that we've had our Race to the Top grant, we have rated 1,400 programs at the 3 and 4 star levels. Which is up from 400 in 2012 at those levels. And of the 20 states with these Race to the Top grants, only Illinois is doing better than Minnesota in terms of moving large numbers of programs into these highest tiers of the rating system. So that's great news. Additionally, so it could be that all of those programs are serving kids who already had access to quality, but it is the case that we have now nearly 25,000 children with high needs in 3 or 4-star programs, up from 3,000 in 2012. So a very substantial increase in the number of children with high needs in these highly rated programs. And again, of the 20 states with Race to the Top grants, only 2, California and Illinois, are doing better than Minnesota on this metric. So that's exciting news. We're making progress. Lots of programs are getting rated. We believe that we're targeting programs that are serving high numbers of low-income children, which is very important to our success. And we feel great about that progress and making even more progress in the coming years. In terms of the diversity of the providers that are serving children, of the home-based providers that speak a primary language other than English, these providers are more likely to participate than their English-speaking counterparts at this point, and we believe that that's because the coaches, technical assistance providers, trainers, all of that is offered in multiple languages. And so the goal of Parent Aware is to meet providers where they are and where they're comfortable in their home language and support them in serving children. Obviously, this is very important as we grow to retain the diverse workforce that we have working with young children and to honor the preferences of parents in terms of having their home language, their home culture supported for their very young children during the day when they can't be with them. And so primary languages other than English, those providers more likely to participate, and also providers of color more likely to participate in Parent Aware than their white counterparts. Most importantly, so we're excited about getting programs to enroll, we're excited about more money, all of those things, but what we're really excited about at the end of the day is driving child outcomes. And so we are, together with Greater Twin Cities United Way, investing a large amount of money in evaluating Parent Aware to make sure that kids in those programs are making gains. And this is preliminary findings from a forthcoming evaluation report. We see kids, all kids. It's a sample of over 1,000 kids. About half of them are from low-income families. That entire sample we see making gains over the year on these measures: early math skills, phonological awareness, print awareness, expressive vocabulary, executive function, social competence, and persistence. And so you can see from that list that we're not looking at a single metric or a single type of outcome. We're really striving to evaluate and assess children comprehensively, look at the whole child, all of the important skills that develop during this early childhood period, and to not lose sight of any of them. And in terms of the portion of the sample of low-income kids, so I want to first say that on all of the measures listed above, the low-income children in the sample are making the same significant gains as their higher-income counterparts. And then below you'll see that they're making even greater gains on the measures of phonological awareness, print awareness, and executive function. So again, in those instances, on those 3 measures, we have the low-income children in the sample making larger gains than their higher-income counterparts over the year, which is really encouraging. And just to kind of stop where Frank left off as well, there's unfinished business, right? So right now, the blue, this kid right here, this is the one who has access to a 3- and 4-star rated program of the 0 to 5-year-olds. For every one that has access, 3 don't. And so that's what we're really, really interested in continuing to address, and that's why we're partnering with the MinneMinds Coalition in support of scholarships. So again, these are children with high needs, primarily children from low-income families, ages 0 to 5. 1 in 4 has access to a highly rated 3- or 4-star Parent Aware program, and 3 do not. And so that's why we're working together with MinneMinds, and we would really encourage everybody here to do what they can to start paying attention as those kinds of notices and other calls to action come to help support us in our efforts to turn more of these kids from orange to blue. And so I have a little bit more information that I can maybe share after Frank leaves, but I'm going to invite him back up here because I know he has to go soon, and we can take some questions, the both of us.
While Catherine collects questions, one of the things that both of you talked about and that I've been reading about, especially if the governor's idea were to pass, is the question of capacity. Just physical space and qualified teachers and nurturers. Could you address those?
Great. I'll start, and then if Erica she needs to correct me, she will. If she has commentary, she'll add that too. So when I think about that question, it often gets asked in the context of, wow, if all the funding came today, $1 billion, which is kind of the price tag, truthfully, of a universal preschool system for all 4-year-olds, what would happen? Well, the reality is the broad system is not ready for a one-time flip of the switch of that scale. If it were a school-based delivery system, we heard many times in testimony last year, schools were very full, just expanding to all-day kindergarten. I'm generalizing a bit, but most or many schools across the state just did not have the capacity to go past the expansion to all-day kindergarten. They just aren't sitting around with that much extra space. Could they plan for it? Absolutely. So if you had runways and things of that nature, multiple year expansions. The broader system is also expanding in its quality, so the work of Parent Aware is allowing more and more home-based providers and center-based providers to come online. And so to answer your question as clearly as I can, if we flipped a switch and we had $1 billion in new funding, I think it would cause an immediate short-term problem. However, there's great evidence, and we'll just use New York City as an example, where they brought on huge amounts of new funding for early childhood, and the entrepreneurial side of a city, of the nonprofit sector and of leaders, did an amazing job rallying to meet that need. And so I just want everyone to know that if we were able to make the investments, phase them in over a couple of years, the entrepreneurial side of our communities would rally, as long as they had a belief that the funding was going to be enough to make a good business model, so they didn't go poor, and that the funding was stable. And I have no doubt our state and every community would rally in really smart ways.
Thank you for your shift in priorities. I'm now firmly behind the initiative. How would these priorities affect children 0 to 5 involved in child protection or out-of-home placement? Perhaps these children could be guaranteed services or given priority.
Well, that's a really terrific idea, and it's one that we talk about often at the MinneMinds Coalition table. So as an example, in testimony last year and in initial drafts of legislation, we began to identify high priority populations in our state who we thought should be at the head of the line. We currently have a designation for children of teen parents that's built into previous legislation, so they're near the front of the line or in the front of the line. But we added homeless children and children in child protection, and there are a couple other very high priority targets. I want you to know that when the final legislation was approved, that was a section that did not advance, and so we'll be back in the next legislative session advocating for those kinds of solutions. We think that a scholarship, especially if it were full day and year round, that could be made available to a homeless child or a child in child protection, as just 2 examples, would be the best solution for that child, because the scholarship would be able to follow the child if the child moved from various situations. And it would also provide a level of stability for that child and their parent that would allow other services to work, I think, more effectively. So there's a lot of support for this, and I'll be surprised if we don't get that done in the next year or 2.
Erica, I think this is a question for you. Does research support that the 3 and 4-star rating levels are high enough quality to make the difference needed? And is the rating system dynamic? I mean, would the standards for 3 and 4-star can keep going up?
Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking. So to the first part of the question, does research support that a 4-star quality is high enough? The study that I mentioned that we've released some preliminary information on about the kinds of gains kids are making is looking at that very question. So we'll have a lot more to say about that when that study comes out early next year. The investment that United Way and my organization have made together in evaluation was designed specifically to address that question. So we're looking at how the outcomes of children vary in the different star levels. And, again, whether it's high enough, I think in terms of the, part of the response, I think, to is it high enough, I think we have to also at the same time hold the reality that there's only so much you can do at age 4 or ages 3 and 4. Gaps by that point are already quite large. When you look at some of the data that I showed about kids making gains, sometimes low-income children making greater gains than their higher-income counterparts means that they end where their higher-income counterparts began. So we have a lot of work to do to address the gaps, and certainly we should do everything that we can to have the highest quality programs possible. We also need to focus on getting children into those types of programs earlier. And then to the question about whether the rating system is dynamic, yeah, it's designed to be a progression. Think about an even set of steps. So we want a child care provider to walk up to that set of steps and have the steps meet them where they are and be able to walk up and improve their quality. So each level builds on the last and increases the standards up to the 4-star level.
And Erica, maybe some people would like an explanation of what we mean by executive function.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. I don't know exactly what is in the measure that we used, but the types of things that are important for children and increasingly that we see, a lot of people talk about the 16-to-1 return on investment. That return on investment essentially comes from skills like executive function or soft skills, if you will, life skills. Those are things like we have a specific measure for persistence, control, being able to control one's emotions and channel them properly or appropriately or in constructive ways, thinking about the kinds of things that kindergarten teachers would like to see with their incoming class, being able to listen to and follow instructions, to sit still for a developmentally appropriate period of time, not in a desk all day, but to interact well in a large group time, for example, or in small group time, those types of things.
And either of you, the statement is, firstborn infants are structurally shut out of support by both scholarships and the Child Care Assistance Program. When will you address the needs of our youngest and most vulnerable children and families?
It was about 1-year-olds?
No, it's firstborn.
Firstborn.
Infants.
Boy, that's an informed question. That's a very informed question. I was going to answer it first incorrectly, so I'll just go down that road. As I mentioned, we launched the scholarship effort at the legislature 3 years ago with a focus on 3 and 4-year-olds. We had a sub-piece of legislation that said if a 3 or 4-year-old child got a scholarship, any of their younger siblings would be eligible as well. So that already actually allows us to serve, about 20% of the scholarships serve children 0 to 2 or 0 to 3. As we go forward, as you can see here, we're looking to begin to expand the intentional use of scholarships to be available for all children 0 to 5. And you'll see us walk out with, I think, greater detail. We're having some budget analysis done by the Wilder Foundation so we can get more informed about kind of what are the real needs for children in the 0 to 3 age bracket or 0 to 2. and that we can put good cost modeling against that. That'll clearly be ready for the session, and you'll see us be stronger about that.
So one of the other things that Frank didn't mention, but that the MinneMinds Coalition and others are very focused on is, and I'm not sure that this is what the question was referring to, but no child is in a formal childcare setting until they're at least 6 weeks old. And often children are in the care of family members for a longer period than that at the beginning of their life. Mine certainly were. And I think that, so in addition to providing families who need it access to formal care settings, high quality formal care settings as early as they need to or want to use them. Focusing again on this parent skill building through targeted home visiting is a great example of that. And there are some other efforts happening around the city and around the state to focus on the adults who are with young children, babies, as early as they're born, their parents, and building their skills so that the interactions that they have are high quality interactions.
I think this is also for you, Erica. Do you keep a list of programs with waiting lists, particularly Head Start? So do you know which programs have the biggest waiting lists?
That's a good question. We do not, the state has some understanding of who's on waiting lists. Head Start keeps a waiting list, and that's something that's, there's public information available about that. School-based programs, individual programs have wait lists. There is not, to my knowledge, a good unduplicated list of children who are waiting for various programs around the state.
And this is the last question, because I know Frank has to leave. This is pretty strong. Why does MinneMinds fight so hard against universal access to pre-K?
Well, it's a very good question and a very challenging question. What I think you can see in the presentation we made today about the future as we see the future, we think the next phase is to address the needs of all low-income children and their families, 0 to 5. That does not mean that we're against universal preschool for all 4-year-olds. But it does mean that we're very clear about the fact that we have a strong priority, that we think low-income children who really, and their families, who need immediate attention, immediate assistance to close the kindergarten readiness gap, really should be at the front of the line. And so we're going to continue, I think, to advocate very strongly that using a parent-directed scholarship model that ties beautifully to a diverse delivery system and is also tied to high-quality results or high-quality opportunities, and that also supports the needs of the parents in whatever way they need, is really the best next phase of the discussion, meeting the needs of those families and those kids. So that should not be taken as we're publicly against universal pre-K, but in the context, where are our priorities, we're very clear.
So thank you, Frank Forsberg and Erica Moss, for your presentation today.